Good evening. Hello, everybody, to the community of the Array Award Conference 2021. This year, like remote only, or not remote only. I see that they are even on stage on the site. But my name is Leonard Sommer, and I have the pleasure to host this panel about leading creative teams in times of remote. I would say that at the beginning, maybe in the first 10 minutes, that everybody, instead of the panelists, switch off the camera so that we know who are the panelists and that I can introduce them. I see so far that we have two of them. As I mentioned, it might be that, or it is realized that David might come some minutes later, but I would say that we start. And let me first introduce to you my so far two guests. So we have actually Dominique Schuchmann. Maybe you can wave your hand so that we know who there, Dominique. He is the founder and CEO of the Mark 13 Group, a group of high-class film production companies catering 2D and 3D animation, VFX and digital post-production for international entertainment, TV and industry clients. Works by Mark 13 have been awarded internationally on multiple award shows. And welcome to our panel, Dominique. Nice that you're here. Excellent. Then secondly, we have Victor. Is it pronounced Pardinho or is it Pardinho? How do you pronounce that?
Pardinho.
Pardinho. He's the co-founder and CEO of Sense of Space, a tech company from Helsinki, building content creation tools for the future of volumetric video and XR technologies. Could you explain this for like maybe a minute? Well, what you are exactly doing? It's interesting.
Yeah, we work basically with holograms. So
okay.
Volumetric studios that capture people with a set of cameras around the person, turns that into a 3D model, that looks really realistic and also moves. And we work on the content creation side, making like editing tools, post-production tools, to be able to create the actual content. And we create content ourselves also.
Okay, cool. So as a designer, researcher, and producer, you work with several international studios, companies, and research groups with projects presented even all over the world. And additionally, you have been a researcher in visual and immersive technologies since a decade, I heard. Welcome to this discussion, actually, Victor. Nice to have you here. Actually, I will introduce David later on when he joins, and would like to open our talk with a little story I brought from the history actually of remote. And what I found out is actually in 1980, the American entrepreneur J.C. Penney allowed his call center employees to work from their home offices actually for the first time. So that was already 1980. 7 years later, 1.5 Americans work as teleagents from their own living rooms. So that's like the born of remote. Hi, David, there you are. Maybe let me just jump back and introduce you. It's great that you're here.
It's all right, sorry to be late.
It's good that you're sitting and without a smartphone. That's excellent. So good. So
mother, in the spirit of beating COVID, my mother's now my reason for being late. So
okay, yeah, I told everybody. Great to have you here. So introduce you before we start then. So David Slocum is academic director and program advisor at Rare Global, the diversity initiatives by Google. What exactly are the diversity initiatives by Google? Could you explain that? It's very interesting. What do you do?
Well, it's not the overarching set of the various DEI initiatives at Google. It is the cluster of different programs intended to serve those companies and individuals who work in the same space as Google Media and Marketing activities. So ultimately, we're under the umbrella of the global CMO, Lorraine Toohill at Google. But the idea is that develop practices, knowledge, and provide training and community, both to diverse individuals who are in the creative media, marketing, design, and technology fields, but also build the business, social, and ethical case for DEI for mid-level managers and ultimately senior decision makers. So we're working with a lot of individuals, in fact, outside of Google, that because of Google's resources, the company believes we can provide productive outreach to.
Thank you. It's interesting. Additionally, already since more than a decade, you took the role as the faculty director, or the different roles, and the professor or academic advisor. You've been, in my eye, one of the main influences of the educational culture of the Berlin School of Creative Leadership. In my eye, also one of the most popular academic institutions in the creative industries. And so welcome on our virtual stage, David Slocum. Thanks to have you here.
Thanks for the kind word, Leo.
So again, with this story about the remote. So I started with 1980, 1987, and 1995 actually. Seabase was one of the first hacker spaces in the world. They opened in Berlin. And this was, by the way, the first co-working space that existed. 2005, the first real commercial co-working space was created in San Francisco. 2010, 59 of the remote workers were already working from home. So for their employer, not freelancers. And 2018, 70% of all workers in the service sector work remotely from home at least one day a week. 2020, the absolute breakthrough, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a remote working tipping point. Without having planted hundreds of millions of people, suddenly have to work from home. Creatives, bankers, students, teachers, everybody. So that's where we are, set the scene. And I would like to start with your personal memories that you three had. So start with you, Victor. How did you personally experience the drastic changeover in the first lockdown where we all needed to move into our home office? How was that for you?
It did not change it at all because we were already working remotely, even before. So when we started the company, me and my co-founder, we were remote already. And we set up a team in Helsinki, and I was already coming to the Netherlands quite a lot. And we had a developer in Spain and one here in the Netherlands. So it was already like half remote. When I came to Amsterdam and stay a bit more time here, then we decided to go fully remote. That was before Corona. And then when the pandemic hit, we were already quite on the track of remoteness. And it was interesting to see because nothing changed at all on our side. And I was talking to like friends. They also run companies in offices, and it was complete chaos to find out. And they came to me, like all of them came to me like asking, what are the tools? Like, what do you use? Slack? Do you use Discord? Do you use Google Drive? Like all lost, but we were already like quite there for a year and a half, so nothing really changed because of the COVID situation. It was just like interesting to see how they affected actually others, and they came and asking, not even aware of the possibility of the tools that were out there.
Interesting. So how was it for you, Dominique? Did a lot change from the one to the other day to the other in your business, and especially how you work practically?
For us as well, it wasn't such a dramatic change. It was quite a change, but not so much, because traditionally when you work in CGI, feature animation, you are used to work with studios all over the world. So we had been doing like Maya the Bee with an Australian studio. So we already worked remotely halfway around the world. And so when the pandemic hit, we just had to add another layer of remote for our artists that usually are in the studio. So that took our administrator like a week or so until all of them had their virtual machines at the office still working and would work remotely from home. There was, I think, the biggest issues that had to be solved weren't technically, but more legally, with all the different people that want their films to be made, but they all had the same issue. So that went very fast. If we had tried this like a year before, that would have been much more complicated, I guess, on the legal side. Yeah.
David, what have been the biggest challenges for you personally?
Well, very quickly, I wear some different hats, but I'll focus on two of the areas. One, which you mentioned, the Google work. Rare with Google began in a specific program designed to piggyback on large global creative events or festivals, like Cannes Lions or in Asia Pacific, Semi-Permanent. The pandemic, our operating model revised. We can no longer meet in person. We could no longer piggyback on those events, and we went entirely virtual. And there were a whole range of different changes that we needed to make in terms of what we were prioritizing, formats, how across time zones, and particularly in terms of the intensive interpersonal coaching and mentoring that we provide to younger, diverse creative talent. We had to reimagine that. So it took us a good deal of time, and the hope now for that we're going to be able to create a more hybrid model, but COVID has forced us to move to Rare with Google 2.0. It was a different undertaking. I'll just throw in briefly, I also do a lot of independent creative leadership, and that was an extraordinary experience during COVID, because much of that I do remotely anyway, or did remotely anyway before the pandemic struck. But I found that the issues, challenges, the needs of clients very much changed. And we can get into some of what those are. I imagine people here in the room, went through, many of those experiences themselves. But I learned a tremendous amount. And again, I ended up working with clients on a whole range of different issues related to their own struggles in working remotely, but their struggles in enabling their creative teams to be more creative and perform well.
I think, on the second hand, you mentioned that you work in the education. That's the name of the education industry. So how actually, I did also personally the MBA program, and for me the greatest thing was also to travel around the world and to see all these people. How do you teach now, and how do you get connected with those creatives, and how do you teach them? How do you do that?
Well, I think not as well, at least in terms of former models. I would just say, a general imperative for me in terms of leading remotely, especially leading for creativity remotely, Leo, and Victor, we've talked about this as well, is to take stock of the best practices, the kind of the proven practices that perhaps we engaged in person. And still, if possible, engage in person in order to lead successfully. We want to develop trust and psychological safety. We want to figure out different ways of interacting with creative people. We want to foster diverse interaction, to kind of insider-outsider bias in terms of creative work. Those all exist in real life. One of the questions is, how then do we take those values and transpose them or reinvent them for remote work or hybrid work? And I think that for educational purposes, there's that same challenge. You're exactly right. You were a wonderful participant, a wonderful contributor in building the Berlin School and the EMBA program. How do we take those core elements, those core defining interactions that people look back to fondly, whether it's in a finance course or whether it's having a beer and really getting to know people after a long day of classes, and recreate those online. Something I've just returned to the Berlin School, because of a larger transition there in terms of ownership advice, and we're really puzzling through that now. I think what it requires is proven practices in remote work, which is being able to co-create with participants, with students, say in an educational setting, with team members in a creative work setting, co-create with them a whole series of different channels that might not need to exist in real life. So encourage kind of informal getting to this water cooler moments. We encourage individuals to reach out based to others in a school program, create a team based on their individual interests, affinities with those around the world, maybe particular challenges that they're facing professionally. So the idea increase the number of opportunities for people to interact, rather than being able to sit back and say, okay, we're all in Shanghai together, to happen, because people who are naturally going to find each other.
I would like to touch on these. You just mentioned the water cooler moment. I mean, we know, I also have been creative for 15 years. Like the best ideas are often not created, they are not created in a meeting room. And we all know that the coffee chat, cigarette break, that's where it just happens. And so the question to especially Victor and Dominique, how did you set these moments in scene? What do you do to create these moments, to lead the people to the spontaneous moments that we needed? We need to really find the idea, actually. What do you think, Victor? What have you done?
Yeah, like we were also talking before, this is for sure one of the biggest challenges that we have ever faced so far, being completely remote. And it's what everybody asks, is that when we ask what they miss, it's definitely the water cooler, the corridor moments where you just talk something. And as I was mentioned before, when we used to work on an actual physical space, we used to play games in the middle of the afternoon and had like great ideas right there that we did not have in the brainstorming, 3 hours brainstorming session. So how to do that digitally is really complex, because you can schedule a meeting. At this moment you schedule a meeting, it's too formal. It's not gonna, the ideas that used to pop at that moment, they're not gonna pop anymore. I don't have an answer, that I'm still searching. I still think games can be a good one, even digitally. If you find like some silly web browser game, everybody can come and just talk. In the moment you start talking without thinking too much, that's when you have the idea. And so how to get those moments online is really, really hard. Because they also hardly happen in written form, right? So Slack channels don't really gonna come up with amazing ideas by writing a message on Slack. So yeah, I'm like very eager to find new ways and trying to do stuff. I don't have any like correct answer yet, but we are experimenting and trying to find these moments on a digital way.
How, Dominique, in your case, I think we need to talk about the early process of, let's take the example of a film that needs to be created, that's the script moment and so on. How do you organize that? Are the creators doing this alone? Do you sit together? How do you discuss storyboards? How is that done today? And how do you create these spontaneous situations?
Like you said, it's divided. Doing CGI animation or any animation film is like a bit divided into two creative phases. The first one is you think of something, you create the story, you create the characters, and the other one is how do you technically and technically take this story and put it into a film or a TV show. And the first one is done by a relatively small group of people. That's like it's an author, it's a director, and a producer, more or less. These three people should be the ones that initiate a creative process, and that still can be done more or less in person if it's needed. But like if you work on an international level with movies, for example, it was always been like this. Like at the moment we are in pre-production for a big international movie, and it's the director and the author. They're in Argentina. I've never met them in real life. I've always met them only online, even before COVID, right? So that's still, this hasn't changed too much. If it would have been needed, we would have managed to meet somehow, I guess. But at the moment, this is not possible at all. So we stick to the old way. Someone writes something, we meet online or on the telephone, and we talk about it, and then we go from there. The other thing is, once you have this story and once you have your financing for this story, then it goes to a whole nother level of creativity, because suddenly you have, in a CGI movie, for example, you have maybe 300 people, 300, 400 artists working on one feature film, and they are not sitting at one place. If you're not called like Pixar or someone, then in terms of financing, you will have it divided into three entities, like maybe in that case it will be Spain, Argentina, and Germany, and 4 different studios. So that's a totally different form of creativity that you have to set up there. And there it's very annoying that you can't meet in person. Because what we are doing at our studio is like we have 40 to 50 people working there when we're in full production, and then we have our dailies where all the artists of a certain work group meet once a day and look at the stuff that's been done, and they talk about it and so on. And things get better from there, because everybody looks at it a little bit different, and you can learn from each other and exchange thoughts. This is not so easy to do online, but it is doable. What you were talking about, the coffee break thing, or what we have been doing in our weeklies on a Thursday night, we have watched the best shots of the week together with pizza and beer, and this is where it really gets personal. And this you can't redo.
Yes,
obviously. I mean, we have tried this with our Christmas party, which in the past was really spectacular parties, always ended by the police. But this year it was a bit of a downer. You know, we were everybody was at home. We did like everybody did a Zoom thing, and that was not really fun.
Yeah,
and I don't think that any creativity can come from that.
That's interesting.
So I'm really looking forward to meet again at the studio.
We spoke yesterday, Dominic and I, also about this topics about incentives, and I think I shared this also with you. We at Brandmaker, we try to find kind of, or we're working on a program where we really bring a little bit fun elements, how far we could do it, and we started before Christmas with kind of an adventure traveling element. So we invited everybody to Tokyo, and then we had, I think it was like 30 minutes, somebody with a skateboard running through Tokyo, and really experienced going through the shops and whatever, to bring to the guys. And we doing that next time in Cape Town, organize something. One of the elements I personally miss the most as a creative also is the inspiration with traveling, because that's actually what was for me the most important thing. Is also the festivals, David, we spoke about. it's not about the festival and the partying. It's really about inspiration. And I'm lacking really of inspiration because of traveling and meeting other people. And how do you have any solutions, systematic solutions, David, that you could share with us?
Well, I don't know if they're solutions for everyone, but a couple of thoughts. One, I think that I just want to call out a particular leadership challenge here. What Dominique is talking about, I find fascinating, and the kind of exploration that leaders need to engage in terms of, okay, what are the right technologies? What's the right mix of and creativity and kind of, head down, really focus. That takes many leaders into a new territory. And it may bring up kind of the familiar remote review sessions, but the larger constellation of activities is the thing that leaders really need to experiment with and figure out what's right for this team, this project, this situation. So I think that requires a lot of creative work. That's the first part. One of the follow-ups to that, this is one of the great lessons of my remote coaching, is that leaders for 3 months in COVID were working at 110%. There's a risk of burning out. There's a risk of growing tired, simply being exhausted by, say, the needs of team members, by the need to explore and experiment, and not having, say, the fuel of, like you described, Leonard. And I think that in terms of leadership challenge, kind of a third layer there, which is to my mind particularly challenging when it comes to remote, is for many creative leaders and leaders who aren't so creative. One of the perennial challenges is what I would call ceding control. And this idea of, okay, I've reached the corner office, I have the new title, I'm the one who's ultimately in charge of this. And this idea of control or authority is very difficult for leaders to give up. And I would say, as a general statement, that remote work or hybrid work requires leaders to step back more. It requires them, in a way, to cede their control, especially in terms of giving individuals, sub-teams, creative space, experiment and explore, rather maybe even from very good intentions, saying, okay, this is the right decision here, or my idea is better there. And I think those compound challenges make make moving to remote and continuing to explore, particularly with different projects like film projects, I think particularly challenging for leaders, however well-intentioned they are. Leaders get tired, leaders get frustrated, leaders just want to be able to settle into it. And I think that we're still in a mode now where remote and hybrid work, and ultimately, as Victor talks about, AR and VR, is going to require kind of ongoing experimentation and an ongoing willingness to say, okay, the best creativity, the best creative interactions are going to come out of in teams and organizations that I'm just not familiar with. And so I think that requires an ongoing commitment, expenditure of energy, which is really challenging.
I want to. So
sorry, Leonard. Really wanted to be sure.
That's all right. I just wanted to step into the topic that you brought up about. You said also that it's more about, let's say, the topic control and really leave it go, right? So I think I read a survey in the last days ran by a creative agency. They found that the majority of employees reported feeling more productive working from home, but many employers didn't feel the same way. So this disparity is partly due to managers not being able to measure productivity accurately, with micromanaging, right? For example, for managers who measure productivity by attendance or amount of hours logged online, naturally, they might assume productivity has dropped, right? Whereas those leaders, and you mentioned these, like who measure productivity more objectively by hitting a target for the creative bigger, let's say for the bigger topic, right? They are likely to get a more accurate measure. So what could be a new mode for leaders to adopt goal setting? How Victor, did you change that a little bit, or
Yeah.
you lead in this?
No, we still work pretty much like on a sprint based, like very like 2 week sprints. But what we found out that actually David was saying that is interesting is that now the level of independence that the employee, the creator, the developer needs to have now is much higher, right? And we need to leave them, with their independence and trust. And also the level of trust now is 3 times more. You really need to trust that people will deliver, because you can't, like, you don't see if they are, on their computers or things like that. And then of course, the ones that are used to be independent and do the work and deliver, they even enjoy, they are fine. But then of course there are, some like they are the ones that do need help or a bit more micro management, and they want that. And now what we have feeling for some time is that it's super hard to ask for help, or harder to ask for help in a remote setting. They don't want to, they think you are on a meeting all the time, and they don't want to come and write a message. It's not that easy just to see that you are okay, that you are not doing something very important, and then you go and you ask for help. So I think, I don't know, like it's hard to say, but it comes to the point that, like I said before, needs to be a bit more individual when it comes to remote. You need to go, you need to find the clues, which is really much harder also to find remotely. If someone's having trouble, or why they did not deliver when they promise, and go individually and try to find the problem and find what is going on. But the level of trust, I think, remotely it needs to be much higher, and be aware that people have problems on being independent also, and working well, being alone at home. So yeah, it needs to be, for us, it became a bit more individual, also on checking on the goals. The goal settings also became a bit more for one by one. Then actually, let's set this big goal, that it doesn't really work that well for a remote setting, I would say.
That's interesting. You mentioned the topic trust. I think it's really a central topic. Dominic, especially, very often creatives go to a company because they trust the leaders, and they really trust that they could really enhance their excellence due to the leader. How do you generate trust, especially also with new people right now? Or how did you do that? And the second question is, how do you really know and trust them that they really feel like they seem to feel? Because you're just only looking at the camera. You don't know what's really happening behind the camera. So the first is really, how do you generate trust as a leader? And how do you know that you really could trust how they really feel?
Well,
it's a hard one.
Generating trust is, I think, easy in my eyes, because Holger, my co-partner, we met in '96. Mm-hmm. We had both been doing CGI for a few years then, and we met at the Film Academy where we studied animation, and founded the company in '99. So the both of us, we have a lot of trust between each other, and I think that spirit has always been there within our company. So and having the background that we worked in other companies as freelancers, and so we always knew how we would like our studio to be in order that we would like to work there. See? So we generated a working environment in which we always would like to work. So now we're here and we are hiring people, and I think it's really in a very quick first talk, we immediately feel if they will like it here or if we would like them to be here. That's something that is really was really fast learned by us. And so therefore we never really had big problems. I mean, you can always be wrong with people. They can be wrong with what they think of us and the other way around. But I think in 90%, 95%, people like to work at our studio. And that has to do with trust, because we trust them that they will deliver the stuff that we need. And they trust us that we get the jobs at hand that they would like to work on. So I think this is not a very hard thing for us. I think what can be wrong there, but yeah, that's the thing about trust. What was the second question?
Yeah, I think it's the topic about the empathy. That's at least in my experience. What I'm taking care of is that I take more time to really set up a session to just only listen how they feel and really what they're doing privately because I mean I'm working in a new company since months where I've never seen the people, so I needed to take the time to really know the person, because usually I mean you just spoke about trust about the work, but what I mentioned is also the trust between the people, which is in my experience as a creative was the best creatives have been in my teams always the ones where I had a really close relation. My brother actually had been the one where I did the best ideas, because I mean there was nothing between us. It must be the same like you, but it's the base of trust that you could think everything, you can say everything, you can share everything. And I was just asking you how do you generate that matter of trust, and on the other side, how do you know that the people really feel good, even if they tell you that they're doing, because you don't know what's happening behind the camera? Which is kind of responsibility also.
Well, I mean, you will never 100% know what's in people's heads, definitely, yeah. But I think you can see on the way what they deliver when it comes to certain tasks of a creative project, which film always is. So they're always working creatively, even if they're doing tech stuff on something. They will always have a creative outcome of it at the end. So and you can see from the things that they deliver that they have fun, especially when you know them a bit. We have this like 15 to 20 people core team that are always there since years, maybe changing one or two people over the years, but the rest of the people, when we're in full production with 50 to 60 people, then there's freelancers that they come in for 1 year, 1.5 years on a project, and we often book people again and again. So I guess that it's Mark 13 is like a balloon of people that goes bigger and smaller if needed, and I think we know our people quite well, and we see from the just anything that they deliver if they're in what shape they are. And I can see now when they work. I can see now when they work remotely. There's a few of them that really like to work at night, and they deliver now better stuff because they can just work whenever they want in the end. Because all they have is they know I have to deliver these and these and these shots in that and that time frame. And when I do this, nobody cares. They just have to be on spot.
That's an interesting point.
A lot of them like that.
Yeah.
And others need more attention and more a bit guidance there.
I want to come to that point, David, about the attention, about the night. I mean, I think we also saw a lot of creatives that they are working they rip their ass off for the idea and work. They don't stop for it because it's a passion.
Right.
What are your thoughts? Should leaders also work on different leadership style and promote times to switch off, to support them, really say, yes, now it's enough?
Yeah, I'm just thinking through all of what Dominic just said, which I think is there's so much there that I think is valuable that can be extracted for other leaders and other teams. I mean, one thing quickly, he talked about the spirit of trust that he and his co-leader, co-founder instilled. I would talk about the same way, but using the word modeling. And part of what leaders do is they model behaviors of both trusting others and being trustworthy themselves. Ways to do that are to express vulnerability, to ask questions, to be respectful, to model again the kinds of approaches that they're hoping other individuals and teams can engage in when it comes to creative work. That leads, I think, to what you're just asking about, which is kind of modeling the expectations that one has about time. I think that one of the ways, and Victor, you mentioned this, one of the ways that control can be exerted is in terms of constantly checking in on when people are working. And one of the realities, I think there's a good deal of research, Linda Grattan at London Business School talks about this. Some of the best work, creative and otherwise, that's done by remote teams is done asynchronously. It's not done when groups of people are online together. So, for instance, there's a whole idea that instead of brainstorming in remote work, we should have brain writing, where individuals, maybe teams, can step back from synchronous gatherings of teams and work asynchronously on written work that can then be reviewed, maybe asynchronously, maybe synchronously, by others on the team. But part of what that requires, again, is the trust of leaders and trust of other team members that the work being done by individuals is in fact they're using their time in a way that contributes to the team. And so again, leaders need to model that, but everyone on a team needs to understand that they have commitments, that they trust others, but they're also stepping up to be trustworthy themselves. Now, your question about time, huge constraints, limitations that need to be drawn. Grattan, again, she studied remote work for 30 years. She talks about these broad areas of social need and work rhythms. It's particularly important when individuals are working remotely and also from home that both individually there are parameters in terms of what hours they're working, what hours they're available, especially to others. And that, and in terms of transparency and the extra communication that remote work often requires, as a leader, those schedules can be collected and shared with the rest of the group. And particularly if people are working across time zones, that becomes particularly important, where people have set hours where they can be contacted. But the assumption is that there are those hours of work that individuals don't want to be interrupted, not necessarily because they're playing with their dog or their kids, but because they are working on edits or writing or whatever work that they are contributing as individuals to the larger team effort. I think that again, I mentioned burnout earlier. I think that without really being careful and thoughtful and in ways creative about how individual work rhythms come together for a team or a project, there's going to be burnout, there are going to be conflicts, there's going to be, I think, less productivity coming out of the necessary mix of synchronous, asynchronous, but also of collective and independent work that moving forward remotely requires.
That's interesting what you said. It's more a little bit what you're saying is to also respect that schedule and the timing of others. Victor, did you change your behavior actually? Did you, if you call somebody, do you check the calendar and just check out, is he working on what? Or you just, because I had the bad habit before the Berlin School, David, thanks for changing that. I just run into the room and say, could we shortly talk about this? And just interrupting the whole session, right? And so did you change now, especially in these remote times, that you check what the people are doing today? What are you doing right now? When do you have time? Or how are you doing that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to remote, you do need to respect quite a lot the times and the calendars, of course, of people. And we do have, of course, we work with developers a lot, and they like the night, right? And they do work a lot at night, but it needs to also be quite careful to check if they are working too much, because they will work too much. And because they like it and they're doing it, but it doesn't mean that it's like that is healthy, right? And one thing also that is important that we try to keep like quite serious is that we do have like if you need to ask something from someone, ask during the day, because it's not like if you work the whole night, it doesn't mean the other person also does. So don't send messages like at midnight, or if you do need to send, sometimes I have to right before, like for your morning, and then write the message. Because if you send at midnight asking something, they will end up doing it at midnight. And then it starts to become a snowball, and things can go like out of the rails quite fast. So yeah, it needs to be quite careful and respect the times, just like physically. I think even more like.
It's interesting what Freddie actually just mentioned. I saw it in the chat. That we've been trying to come up with ways to encourage overproductivity versus enabling underproductivity. I like that. We need to enable, just it's also to take the time. Would you dive into that topic, Freddie? Would you just join for a minute to the discussion? Would like to invite you. Hi, Freddie.
Hi.
Just bring that topic up because I liked it. Just want to introduce you to the discussion.
Yeah, and I even as I said it, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, all good.
Even as I said it, over productivity. I don't want anybody to be more productive than they've contracted to be. But there's this truism that people who have the opportunity to do what we're doing now with remote work, that they have an opportunity to give back to the company more, or to the team more than they probably would have. And finding that balance, because if I give them an opportunity to give me more, and I'm generous about it. My second comment is balancing that generosity versus accountability, and asking of everyone to give what they're able. But in that, with generosity, you're giving space for underproductivity, and that's a challenge, because they'll take as much as you'll give them. That's that balance as a person who tries to connect with, as a manager who tries to connect with my teammates in a positive way, and encourage that self-responsibility, self-reliance, and generosity back towards the company. So that's what I'm most concerned about in engaging in remote work.
Yeah, that's
Freddie. Can I pick up on that, Leonard? Just a moment. I think, Freddie, you absolutely nailed it. And you used the word generosity and accountability. I think one of our greatest management scholars, Amy Edmondson, who of course writes about psychological safety. She contrasts psychological safety with accountability. And I think you've really summarized nicely, because we want people to feel safe. We want that level of trust to exist, but we don't want people to be so comfortable at work that they don't feel accountable. So again, different situations, different people, that needs to strike that balance. The other thing I would just say and pick up on, and I think it's a thread here, and it goes back to one of the hats that I wear, which Leo mentioned. One of the challenges for leaders in particular with creative teams in the time of remote is appreciating all the more that the individuals on their teams are not only diverse as people in their own skin, but they're also diverse in the ways that they're able to and hopefully be productive and creative and particularly teams that have moved from working together in real life to working remotely. That requires a reset in terms of leadership expectations about how people are able to engage. I mean, introversion, extroversion plays a role in this. Some people have issues with screens. Some people, again, we're talking about independence and more interactive coordination. That can play out differently for individuals for all sorts of reasons in remote settings. So one of the, I think, challenges for leaders of creative teams working remotely is precisely to take new stock and develop a great appreciation and understanding of both those individual needs, but also how all those individual needs and tendencies then fit together in the current team. Again, it's a lot of work to kind of audit and then monitor, but it's absolutely critical because otherwise you may be a very sensitive leader in real life to specific individual needs, but the complexion of those needs in remote settings could be entirely different.
I think actually that's pretty interesting, David. I mean, if you remember the model that Google established a long time, the 70-20-10, and they had this time just only to push innovation in a time where you are not working on work challenges that are given. So, and that was more or less the I think one of the secrets that they had in the 90s to really create innovation, right? So give more time and spare time for what you would love to do. And the problem is more or less that again, in these times when you have these free times, you generate the best ideas because you're not focused on operative stuff. No? I think that's kind of what it underlines. I want to point out one last question as to finalize. Actually, we discussed this also, Victor and David. So creatives are actually. You can remain on stage, Freddie, whenever you want us. Invite you. So creative work often we work hard to have appreciation and also applause on stage. That's driving a lot of creatives really to get value for that. And that's why successes and good performances must be celebrated. And that's why we have the awards show industry. So really, you got appreciation of saying, yeah, that's so cool and whatever. How do you make sure that right now in these times, we proactively value the performance and creative excellence? How are you doing that, Dominic? Without awards.
Without awards, yes. I mean, we do some advertising work that's, of course, now lacking all this award show thing. But when it comes to the entertainment sector and when we do films and TV shows, the people don't really work for the awards, but they work for the credit. They want to be they want to see their name on the big screen somewhere in the rolling titles or maybe even in the front titles, you know. And so our whole process of producing animation films is the whole way through is a process of constantly talking about the work and appreciating it, and in the dailies and in the weeklies and in the weekly meetings with the director, you get instant feedback about your work. So if you're a modeler, you will have in your modeling dailies, you will meet the modeling supervisor who is in contact with the director, and he will tell you, yeah, this model looks great. Here we have a bit of a problem. You can, do this or that to change it and make it better, or according to the standards that had to be met. So I think in that area of entertainment film, the people are very well fed with that feedback, I guess, because in the end you will have to deliver something that is like 80 minutes long, has 1,600 shots, that equals like 120,000 single frames that have to be produced to have this feature film. So if you don't have this over a period of 2, maybe 3 years of production, and constantly give the people the feedback, you will not get there.
It's much more pragmatic than I thought, this industry.
It is. It has to be. It's because it's so. That's why I mentioned the 120,000 frames you have to produce. You know, and that it's huge in every number that you point out there. You know?
Excellent. So I just read that we need to wrap up in a minute. So even if I would love to hear your appreciation initiatives as well, Victor, but. Thanks so much to everybody. Thanks, David, also that you rushed in. Thanks, Victor and Dominic. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's fine. Thank you.
Hope to see you on anywhere else on another stage in the next 2 days, right? Good, and all the best to your mom, David.
Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Okay.
See you all soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.